from Oregon's Constant Gardener. It's the OCGFAM Show for Tuesday. So, Tuesday we talk about nutrients and inoculants. We've been talking about Nectar for the Gods for the last couple of weeks, going through the Spartan regimen. So, let's just recap. We went through how you do it, how you mix it up, the amounts, the philosophy. We went through all the step-by-step instructions. Then we had the notes, and we had Scott Ostrander, the founder and owner of Nectar for the Gods, came in. We talked about pH is critical, start with good soil, when in doubt, flush it out. And we did a slurry test to show how to measure what's going on in your soil. And we talked about flushes, but we didn't actually do a flush. So I was able to get Scott to come back in and do a flush. And so that's the video that's coming up now, so check that out. And I'll talk to you after. So we got Scott here. We're talking about the Spartan regimen. He was over here. We did this part ourselves here, the first part, and then we went through the notes, and Scott told us about pH is critical, start with good soil, and when in doubt, flush it out. Briefly, mostly we talked about the slurry test. Now we're going to go into the flush. So what's a flush?
Flush is it's a lot of things. Generally most people when they talk flush, they talk about preparing the plant for the end of the plant's life cycle, getting the fruit ready for...
That's the industry term.
That's the flush. I'm flushing, I'm reducing what's in the soil and the medium. Some people believe they're pulling out the salts and the heavy metals from the fruit and the plant. Mm-hmm. The goal is basically to get this root zone completely clean, washed out, so the plant's not absorbing any more nitrates, any more phosphates. They aren't turning the fruit harsh. So, the industry standard is 10 to 14 days. A lot of people in the industry just use water as a flushing agent.
You start seeing all the leaves yellowing out, the plant's using
from
every
the bottom up, they're consuming themselves. There's a little cannibalism going on. They're defoliating as they go. That's a great, you've done it right if you get to that point where you hit fall. But, in reality, sometimes we don't get there. So,
but mechanics of the product of using Nectar for the Gods, there's some different things you do.
There is, because we call it ripening. We say flush for the standard of, that's what the industry calls it. We're from a bigger agricultural industry where, there is no time. You don't flush a pear tree, you don't flush an apple tree, you don't flush broccoli and tomatoes. Mm-hmm. It's what's happening in the soil. So what we're doing is we're ripening by adding more calcium phosphate, reducing the nitrates, reducing the potassium, basically getting to the point where the only thing we're offering left is the calcium. The first calcium flush we do, we want to see substantial runoff because we're trying to tie things up, push them away from the root zone. Okay. From that point on, we're just going to maintain the plant's health and life up until the day of harvest with bone meal, possibly Aphrodite's extraction, and the Olympus up, just to keep them not fed, but producing the last cells in the flower up until the last day of harvest.
Okay, but also we can have issues with, we look at our soil, we got weird pH, weird parts per million, and we're trying to deal with something like that, and that's a flush too. Where there's
and that's it, is a lot of folks will email the company and ask, should I feed this once a week? Should I feed this every other day? What schedule should I follow? And what most of the customers are telling us is they do a feed, and then a compost tea or an instant tea like the cultured products or a microbial
like Mammoth Pea or something like that.
Pea,
Microbe Life.
Head injuries. So I look at it as 2 feeds in a row, then a microbial inoculant, whether you're brewing a tea or a bottled microbe. Mm-hmm. Then we go back to 2 more feeds, and then there's the Herculean flush. The Herculean flush in that span, that's only 6 waterings there. So you got the couple that are feeding the plant, 1 that's adding the microbes, a couple more feeding the plant, and then 1 that's just preventing any issues from happening. Okay. We're not skipping a feeding. We're offering the calcium still. They're still getting the calcium phosphate from the bone meal. You can throw Aphrodite's in as preventative. But what we're doing is we're taking the excess of things that have built up in the soil, tying them up so that the plant won't start accessing salts and accessing acids when it doesn't need to.
And then our microbials will come in and break that stuff up and give it back to it in a fashion that it can handle.
Yeah, and that's the benefit of our flushing is that we're tying things up and turning them into organic compounds through chemistry.
They can be used at a later date instead of trying to just dump all that stuff out the bottom of the pot.
Yeah.
But we do want some coming out the bottom of the pot to what end?
Well, that's it. It all depends on your soil slurry tests. Depends on what type of flush you're doing. Okay. So I have 3 flushes. I've got a curative flush where my parts per million are 1,200 parts per million. My pH is 5.9. I need a cure flush.
Okay.
So I'm going to flush this to where I got 25-30% runoff. I'm going to flush it at a higher pH. So if it was at 5.7, you know, I'm going to be up at like 6'4", 6'5", 6'6",
going a little bit higher in the range.
Up.
We want to stay within that 6'2", 6'8", but you're going to be higher up in that.
Yeah, buffering it.
Right. Okay.
And then for the parts per million, the salt buildup, I'm going to, at that 12 or 1500, I'm going to put 2 tablespoons of Herculean because I'm looking for more reaction.
I got you.
Not only more reaction, because when you put in that much Herculean into a gallon, it drops the pH, which means we have to use more Olympus Up, which is more limestone and more calcium, which is more agents to tie up more salt.
Okay.
So when I have super high parts per million, I'm going to add a lot of Herc, which means I have to add a lot more Olympus, which means I get a lot more calcium to do the work to tie up stuff.
So that Herc is, you want a lot of it in there, but also just by that you're bringing it down to where you can bring it back up with your Olympus Up to get more Olympus Up in there so that you got more buffering in your soil to even out that situation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that would be the curative. Preventative is just that. It's a feed, feed, flush. Everything looks great, so I'm not even worried about doing the slurry test because there's no sign of this plant that's telling me, hey, you know, you should be checking the slurry before you do this flush.
But it's just part of doing business.
Pretty much.
Okay. And then there's the thing at the end that we already talked about,
which is the flush to the end for flavor, for finalizing the last of the oil production, for the last of the cell development, and the hardening off of the fruit.
Okay.
What we're going to do today is literally do the feed flush for the end.
This is the standard one, and they might be very different a little bit with the others, but this just gives someone an idea, actually seeing you how it's done.
Sure. Yep.
Hands on. So let's do it. What do we do?
So we're going to pretend this is our very first flush. We got 14 days left to harvest.
Okay.
Everything's looking beautiful. This bud is a little small, but it'll catch up with this one. So we're going to get to the point where we're start our final flush stage.
Okay.
So on the initial final flush, what I like to do is I like to get at least 50% runoff off the bottom.
Oh wow, okay, so
I want to lock it, I want to tie it, and I want to push it.
Okay.
Normally, I've got 6 plants in the trays, myself, much larger. So I start by going through and I water them all, so they're saturated, and then I come back through and I water them one more time to push it out.
Okay.
So the first saturation is literally to get it saturated, let the calcium start bonding. The second one will be to take a lot of that and push it from the root zone.
Time frame for that from the first, just like go all the way to 6.
For my 6 plants, it takes 10 minutes.
Okay.
10-15 minutes total, because I literally go through when I'm done with the volume. The last one, I come back through and just hit it again. So,
okay. Well, let's do it.
For the sake of this, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this tiny little girl tray and go with the big man tray, because I like to add elevation. I'm using caps from my bottle. I put those underneath the pot, so when I'm doing my flush, anything that freely drains from here will not get reabsorbed in. Because there's everything we're trying to get rid of.
Well, that's what we want it out. We don't want it to suck back up again.
It won't come out again.
Sure.
So
yeah.
We're going to pretend that we're elevated. This is going to be our initial flush. We're 14 days out.
Okay.
We got 2 gallons of water in here. We're going to go ahead and mix this at the slurry was perfect.
So yeah, no
left there. 6, 420 parts per million.
So we're just going to pretend it's not that.
It's perfect. We're harvesting.
Okay.
So for this, I'm going to go with I go on the higher side of these flushes. So I'm at the 30 mils. So being that's 2 gallons, I'm going to go 60 mils on it, which is going to take me all the way up to here. 60. All right, so that bone meal's in here now, and now we're just going to give it a nice stir. Let the pH drop to its lowest point. Now it looks like we're at 5.5, so we got to bring it up almost a full point with the Olympus Up here, pre-shaken. Go ahead and add a glob. Got that 6.4 range. Alright. So now we're going to go ahead and administer this to the...
It's exciting. Let me get a little administer.
Alright. Boy, the downfall of these is gotta keep them stirred.
You know what you could do? You could get one of those hurricanes. If they were available. But they're not, right? You can't get one of those. Nobody has them.
No, he's taking pre-orders right now.
Really?
You bet. All right. So on my initial flush, I like to go ahead and fill it right up to this rim, basically. I mean, it's going to be a slow drain. At this point, I'd be going to my next pot. I'd be going to my next pot, my next pot, kind of watching them. I also like to daydream, look at the flowers while it's draining.
Nice.
Once it gets to that last one, this one will have gotten to the bottom, or will have absorbed in.
You know what we could do? We could skip forward in time. We're in the future. Everything seems so different now, doesn't it?
Why do I make fertilizer for a living? We could be selling those things.
We could get one of those little gambling books that tells what all the odds all the sports were, or all the odds of all the scores.
And ride hoverboards.
Yes! What are we doing? So now the plants, it's soaked in, and so now you're going to put some more in there.
Because I didn't get that much runoff on the bottom. I mean, I only put in 1,000 mils. So that's not even, that's 2,000 mils worth of soil there.
You're good to go.
So I'm just trying to get it to where I'm giving it a really good healthy flush. This is going to go through, kind of look at it, see what I think, maybe even top it off one more time until my entire flush solution's gone. And then I'm done with this plant until it needs to be watered again. The next time I water, I'll just probably simplify with 1 tablespoon of Herc, 1 tablespoon of Aphrodite's, pH that to 6.4, 6.5, and then the next time I'm just going to water it, not
just a normal
flush
water.
it. Yep, just enough to maybe see a little runoff, but I'm not trying to flush out everything again.
Sure.
This is my initial heavy-duty flush.
Water pouring through it. What, 20% or so comes out the bottom?
For my final flush, that initial flush, I'm looking for, twice out.
Twice out.
I'm really trying to strip that soil one time, and then from here on out, that's it. I'm not bothering with 5 times through flushing. I'm just trying to tie up this excess salts that were created during the growth process.
Beautiful. So that's a flush.
So far.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so that's pretty good. We've got through the whole sheet. So let me tell you what's next. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to start talking about some microbial products and how those fit in with using the line, compost teas, straight up microbials, micronutrients, that kind of thing. So we're going to talk about that next. But before we get into that, let me ask you this. We've gone through the whole chart, the whole Spartan regimen. So do you have any questions? Are there any things you'd like to addressed? So let me know about that in the comments, and I'll get Scott on the line, and we'll talk to him and find out answers to your questions straight from the source. And if there's no further questions, then we'll get on to these microbial products, or we'll get with whatever your questions are. So that's the show for today. Thanks for watching. I love you. I'll see you soon. For more information about anything on today's show, go to our website, OCGFAM.com.
It's the OCGFAM Show. It's pretty good. It happens every day. It's the OCGFAM Show. See you tomorrow.